So, since the 89th Academy Awards, there has been some controversy over Casey Affleck winning Best Actor. Now, I don't want to exaggerate, the controversy hasn't yet reached a sort of level where it's completely um, overshadowing the event, because obviously the mix-up in the announcement is really the main story that people are taking from it. Nevertheless, there has been certain responses in various publications about this. Um, just for a bit of context, if you're not familiar with this, Casey Affleck won Best Actor for his role in Manchester by the Sea. I haven't seen that, but I've seen The Assassination of Jesse James by the card Robert Ford, in which he played Robert Ford. So I'm not very familiar with his work, but I was quite impressed by that. Manchester by the Sea, I wanted to go and see that film, but never got around to it. Anyway, he was awarded because the Academy obviously felt that he had the strongest acting performance of the five nominees. Um, Whether he deserved the award or not on artistic merit, that's always a matter of debate, because people always debate based on what films they've seen and so on. But it is some of the controversies around his life outside this is garnering question marks. So basically, 7 years ago, 2010, while he was, I believe he was producing a film, two of the women involved in that made sexual harassment claims against him. Now, this ultimately was settled outside court, so he was never, convicted of anything. But that shadow seems to have kind of re-emerged with obviously his name being put on the nominations this year for his role in Manchester by the Sea. And there has been a lot of sort of talk about some of the body language that his peers were using. For example, when Brie Larson handed out the Oscar, she was notably quite cold, might be the wrong word, but her body language, nevertheless, certainly didn't look overly happy about it. And the same could be said for a lot of his peers in the audience. Um, some said Denzel Washington looked pissed off. Now, whether that was because he believed Affleck doesn't deserve it because of this controversy, or he doesn't deserve it because of his role, or it was just jealousy that he didn't get the award, who knows? The thing about being a celebrity is body language really is scrutinized more than if you were just a regular person. So people might be reading too much into that. Um, I actually put a post on Facebook about how I was feeling about this situation because I've given some thought to it. What I'm actually going to do is paraphrase myself. This is what I wrote on Facebook, and it more or less sums up what I want to say on this particular issue. After I paraphrase this, I'm going to talk about certain other issues because I believe this is important and it goes well beyond Casey Affleck. So this is what I wrote. With Casey Affleck winning Best Actor, there is a lot of debate around someone accused of harassment being recognised for an achievement. For me, this is not a black and white issue. Here's my take. I think it is wrong that whenever women come forward with claims of harassment, some people will automatically accuse them of being liars and worse. I also think it is wrong that someone is vilified for allegations which have never been proven, because even if said person is not guilty, their reputation will be perpetually tarnished. I do not believe in trial by media. I believe guilt or innocence should be established solely in a court of law. There have been cases where guilty men have escaped justice, but also cases of innocent men being destroyed. In this case, the cold response from his peers suggests they may believe that such behaviour is a characteristic. The fact it was settled out of court could mean any number of things. Summed up, no one vilifying either the women or Casey Affleck Nolan personally. I think it is wrong to equate allegations with truth, but it is also wrong to equate allegations with lies. The truth is we just don't know what for certain either way. So what I find is in cases like this, they tend to really polarize opinion because there have been other high-profile cases involving powerful male celebrities. Um, Roman Polanski, Woody Allen, Mel Gibson, and we'll come back to Mel Gibson and his case in a minute. But There's been numerous others, I'm sure many others I won't even name. Um, and always been debate. And what tends to happen is the hardcore fans of these people tend to get around them and really go out of their way to defend the person, and then go out of the way to try and imply that. Marlon Brando is another recent notable example. Um, Fans tend to go out of the way to defend the person because, for obvious reasons, they don't like someone they admire being tarnished. Um, but then the other school of thought, and I suppose this comes into, it is sometimes feminist, but not always. They then absolutely believe the accusers, and they believe that the man being accused is a monster. So it's sort of two extreme positions. I wish more people would take not a neutral position necessarily, because people are going to believe what they believe and they're going to have an instinct one way or another. But these people should recognize that in cases like this, when it's it's one person's word against their accusers, you cannot make sweeping statements. So, like I rounded up, no one vilifying either the women or Casey Affleck know them personally. We don't know for a fact that Casey Affleck isn't a sleazy guy who, harasses women, and we don't know for a fact that the women are liars. Um, there have been more famous examples than Casey Affleck, Mel Gibson. Incidentally, before I get onto that, I'll just say this in passing because it also ties in with the subject nature of this video. Elle, the women's magazine, had a very scathing article, and they put it as the Academy awarding Casey Affleck for his abuse of women. Now, whatever your position is, that is a bit absurd because the award wasn't. Firstly, it's not a human rights award, as someone pointed out. It's an award for acting. So it's not an award over great personalities. It's an award for acting. There have been many politically incorrect figures have won the award over the years. So if you're going to go down the line of wanting people with perfect personalities, I think that's a bit misguided. Um, and this is true of any field. You know, so I think they're wrong to suggest. I think that L article was wrong to suggest it is rewarding him. But the other problem with the article was it was incredibly one-sided, and it was treating. I mean, they had to write accusations for legal reasons, so they had to write alleged crimes. But it's pretty clear the writer had already decided. She had already decided he is guilty, and I'm going to write about him as he is guilty. So it was certainly not a neutral article. Um, and I think that's problematic. In my opinion, it's trial by media. Now, people will say, oh, it was settled out of court, so he was trying to silence them. There's a number of things to take from that. There could be many reasons why a wealthy man who's in a position of public recognition would want to settle something out of court. It could be that he doesn't want it to be an ongoing distraction to his career. If he's innocent, he obviously wants to move on. Now, of course, the other side of that is if he's guilty, he doesn't want to be charged. So, and he doesn't want his reputation ruined. But in some ways, the famous party, and I'm talking about men, but this could equally apply to famous women as well. In some ways, they are at stake of losing more because as a famous person, it's their reputation is going to be tarnished much more than the accuser, because in most cases, the accuser or accusers are not famous people. Um, So if someone is involved in politics or business or acting or singing or sports, if they have been accused of a serious crime, in some ways they're finished. There's famous precedents to this. Roscoe Arbuckle. In the early 1920s, he was involved in the highly publicised legal case involving the rape murder of a young actress. Now, in the end, he was exonerated. And yet, even to this day, 90 years on, his reputation has never really fully recovered, even though he was exonerated in a court of law. Now, I'm not saying he's innocent, but the facts are the facts. He was exonerated. and the facts of what we know. So that to me is kind of counter to this feminist narrative that famous men accused of things completely get away with it. I don't think that's entirely true. Roscoe Arbuckle didn't get away with it. So instead of being remembered as a pioneer of comedy, he's remembered as the guy who stood trial for a serious crime. Um, and the thing is, if you're in the public eye, even if you're cleared, even if you're exonerated, there will always, always, always be that glimmer of, oh, he could have done it. And I think that is something that famous people have to deal with in a way that Joe averages or Jill averages don't have to deal with. Because a Joe average may suffer some reputation loss among his immediate peers, but if he's not in a famous position to begin with, I don't think it's going to have the same effect necessarily. But I think fame can be either, in these situations, it can either be a strength or a weakness. And this was actually brought up in the Mel Gibson case. Now, with Mel Gibson, that's something I spent time listening actually to those notorious phone calls. Someone has managed to get their hands on them. I don't know how, but I listened to those phone calls. Basically, Mel Gibson was heard ranting to his ex partner, Oksana Gregorieva. Now, the phone calls were pretty explicit. Um, I don't know whether he was drunk in the phone calls or whether he was just very, very angry. But whatever way you look at it, they were quite explicit. Now, the response on that thread was almost universally people rounding up to call Oksana Gregorieva a gold digger, a whore, she just wants his money, etc., etc., etc. Um, and what they seem to be basing that on is the fact that the phone calls were recorded. This is again is back in 2010, the same year as Casey Affleck's accusation. Um, but I've given a bit of thought to the Mel Gibson case. Now I looked at she appeared on Larry King to clarify some of the situation with her lawyer. Her rationale for recording it was that she genuinely feared whether she would live through the night. Now, in the audio, you can clearly hear Mel Gibson making threats, or at least someone who sounds a lot like Mel Gibson. Some would say that there was a conspiracy, that there was an actor who had his voice. I don't really buy that. I just don't, I don't know, but my instinct is that was Mel Gibson because his personal troubles are well documented, so it's in keeping with character. Um, and basically, he says some pretty disgraceful things. Part of the audio, he says she deserves to get raped by a pack of N word. Now, what bothers me slightly as a man is the number of guys, and they are mainly guys, lining up to defend Mel Gibson and saying, oh, it's all her fault because she's provoking him. And clearly the guy's having a mental breakdown and so on. And they're making excuses for something that really is not condonable. Now, whether she's a gold digger or whether there is a bit of manipulation going on her part, I don't think we'll ever really know for sure. But whatever way you look at it, I don't think there's any excuse for the sort of language he was using to tell a woman that she deserves to be raped. I don't think there's any rational way to condone that. Now, to be clear here, I'm not coming from a white knight perspective. I'm no male feminist. I'm no, and I am fully aware that there are some women out there who are completely manipulative and they use psychological abuse against men. No question about it. But, I'll let people decide for themselves. Check out the audio, just type in Mel Gibson rant. Check for yourself. Now, people will say that shouldn't be online, but the thing is, in cases of domestic violence, one of the main things is always, oh, where's the evidence? Well, if that is Mel Gibson, and I don't see any strong indication that it isn't, um, that's evidence. So, people will say that recording it makes her look really bad because it's like she's trying to extort money. But if you actually look into the ins and outs of the case, it is really not that simple. So for me, that's the other side of this. Sometimes people are far too quick to defend celebrities because they're fans of that person. And I think in the case of Mel Gibson, it's basically a lot of guys because let's face it, Mel Gibson's a man's man, you know, and they respect that. And I think it's unfortunate that people allow their starstruck mentality to cloud the fact that there might be another side to someone that they just don't want to accept. In other words, if they're a fan of Mel Gibson, they just can't bear the thought that someone is saying bad things about him. Bad things that, as far as I'm concerned, have quite a lot of weight. As for the mental breakdown thing, I've been in situations where I've went through severe depression, and I've had women who have, you know, I've been in real heated rows with, but I would never in a million years tell a woman that she deserves to be raped. I mean, that's, as far as I'm concerned, beyond the pale. Um, people say things when they're angry, but I don't know. I think in that case, and I don't know, I don't know all the details, but in that case, I do suspect that, people were rounding up to call her a gold digger. Well, just as it is, it's problematic when innocent men get falsely accused of things, I also think it's wrong to point blank accuse women of being liars, and that does seem to be a trend. Every time prominent men are accused of something, it's always the same thing, and we saw this with Donald Trump as well. It's always the same thing. Oh, they're money digging whores who want, they just want the money or they just want attention. I have no doubt that there are women out there who are manipulative, and there are women out there who are gold diggers. But you also have to ask the question, would a woman put herself through the vitriol of someone's fans? Would she put herself through a situation where she's going to be called all sorts of names, a gold digger, a whore, for money? Possibly, possibly not. But I do stand by what I said on Facebook, which is that when we don't know for absolute certain either way, people shouldn't make blanket statements. Now, in terms of if someone is actually guilty of something, that's another thing to look at. I take the view that if someone has served their time, that is, if they've committed a serious time and they've went to prison and they served their time, I don't believe they should be punished for life. Um, I can understand if someone has been charged with something and they've done their time and then they're automatically kind of getting awards and it looks like they're being rehabilitated in that sense automatically. I'm not sure if that's right. But I do not believe in punishing people on an accusation. So, in any field, if a politician is accused of something serious, does that mean they shouldn't be allowed to run for office? I'm not sure. I think only if they are actually found guilty. Same with actors, same with singers. And I'm not just talking about men, I'm talking about women as well. There's a world of difference between being accused and being found guilty in a court of law. And I think part of the problem is, well, in the American situation, I think big money far too often comes into it. So I do feel uneasy about the fact that everything is always settled through big money payouts and claims and counterclaims. In my opinion, money weighs far too much into the American legal system, and that does make me uneasy. Another problem I have, and this is true of both the UK and the US, although in the UK we have stricter laws about filming in a court of law. Um, for example, even today, we have court artists who actually draw the defendants rather than it's forbidden to take pictures in a British court of law, which is quite unusual. But I think there's some good cause for that. But the problem is, trial by media means someone is going to be damaged by a certain segment of the population forever, even if they're found innocent. Now, the other side of it is there will be people who will be found guilty and they will have a hardcore contingent of fans who will always defend them. So with fame kind of comes that mixed thing. It can either be a defense in the case of hardcore fans blindly defending them, or it could be an Achilles heel in the fact that because of your fame, you then get accused of say something very serious like rape or harassment or something like that. That is going to tarnish you whether you are guilty or innocent. So what makes me uneasy in the case of the Affleck case is people are treating accusations as if they equate to guilt, and I think that's wrong. Now, whether his fellow actors know something that we, as regular people, don't know, remains to be seen. Because obviously, in any environment, you're going to have peer experience. People are going to know someone's character because they're going to be working with them all the time. His brother's been very quiet about all of this, so I don't know. It does make you wonder. I mean, you would kind of think if he was totally innocent, Ben Affleck would be very quick to defend him, and other people would be quick to defend him. It's a bit different in this case because when Roman Polanski was charged with things, the Hollywood elite kind of rounded up to defend him. Now, in the case of Casey Affleck, whether it's because he's not quite that famous, but there seems to be a bit of shortage of defenders within the industry. So maybe it's Hollywood kind of saying we don't want to be accused of being elite anymore. I don't know. There's a lot of ways to look at it. But I'll just close with this. When it comes to high profile people accused of something serious, high profile men in particular, because that is more, it happens more often, frankly, people should be very careful about making sweeping statements either way, unless someone has, done their time. In cases where something has never been proven, in cases where there has been doubt, people cannot say, oh, he's escaped scot-free, because there have been cases of miscarriages of justice of innocent men. I mean, recently in the UK, Cliff Richard. There's a whole follow-up about historic abuses. It turned out that he was totally innocent. The BBC had to apologise to him. There have been other cases where high-profile men have escaped. But basically, in my opinion, people shouldn't make rash judgments either way when you simply don't know. So in the case of Casey Affleck, the only people who know the truth is Casey Affleck himself and the two women who accused him. They're the only people in the world who know the absolute truth. So people shouldn't rush to demonize someone, and they shouldn't say, "Oh, he's a piece of dirt" because he was accused of that. But nor should they blindly defend someone. So the Mel Gibson fans who are going out of their way to say, "Oh, she's a whore, she's a gold digger." As a man, I totally disassociate myself with that mentality because you guys don't know. It doesn't matter how great a filmmaker he is. He could be the world's greatest filmmaker. He could still be a piece of shit off screen. You just don't know. You just don't know. And I do think, based on those audios, it doesn't matter what the context was. It doesn't matter that he didn't know he was being recorded. The words speak for themselves. And a man who threatens or who says a woman deserves to get raped, I'm sorry, but to me, there has to be some serious question marks there. Um, in that particular case, my instinct actually is a bit more towards her, quite frankly. And I wouldn't usually say that. But anyway, I'll leave it there. In the end of the day, people cannot be totally neutral. They're going to have opinions one way or the other. That's unavoidable. But people should at least try not to make sweeping statements when they simply don't know. So when someone is accused of something, I certainly don't think they should face this wilderness where they're completely shunned because an accusation is not the same as being charged. So if I was a director, would I not employ actors or actresses because they've been accused of something? If I thought they were good for the role, I would still take them. If it was a case that they were found guilty, well, that would be a different matter. But there is a world of difference between being accused and being found guilty. And I would also appeal to people not to be so starstruck that they think their idols don't have another side. Because what you know from Mel Gibson is his public persona, as a director, as a filmmaker. You don't know what the guy's like in private. So people need to bear these points in mind. Let me know your thoughts. This is a bit of a longer video, but there was a lot to cover. Thanks for watching.